On the night of Christmas when everyone was together, Marissa was alone, facing the decision that would change her life forever. She had no idea that one simple click, an impulsive leave request, would open doors to an encounter capable of transforming everything, even destiny itself. But before that choice became courage, and before Caleb appeared like lightning in the middle of gray routine, Marissa still had to face her biggest fear, discovering who she really was. Where are you listening to this story from? Subscribe to the channel to live every chapter with us. The night of Christmas in Seattle had that particular smell that only December could bring. A mixture of artificial pine with cinnamon, hot chocolate spilled on the busy streets of Capitol Hill, and that feeling of emptiness that nobody likes to admit. The streets were empty now, past 10 o'clock at night. The last-minute shoppers with their bags had disappeared. The bars still echoed with distant laughter, but for Marissa Carter, it was all just background noise. Marissa was alone in her apartment on the third floor of a 1980s building, the kind of construction that still held the elegance of an era that would never return. The walls were white, the curtains a faded blue, and the only Christmas decoration was a red stocking hung on the refrigerator door, a gift her mother had left there years ago, when she still believed things would change. When she still believed Marissa would have children to fill that apartment with laughter. She was 38 years old. Not old, but not young enough to ignore the weight of that number. Her brown hair, which used to fall in waves to her shoulders, was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore a gray pajama set she'd bought at the mall 3 years ago and that had become her uniform at home. Her eyes, which someone once described as honey-colored in sunlight, now had that dull tone of someone who spends too many hours in front of a computer. Marissa was a systems analyst at a large technology company. Her work was good, well-paid, respected. She had conquered all of it alone, without anyone's help. She'd left her parents' house at 22, paid for her college working as a waitress on weekends, climbed the career ladder rung by rung. She had everything a successful woman should have: her own apartment, an imported car in the garage, a bank account that didn't scare her to look at. But on that Christmas Eve, alone in her silent apartment, Marissa asked herself for the millionth time, why wasn't any of this enough? The television was on, but she wasn't paying attention. A Christmas movie was playing, that kind of movie that shows perfect families around abundant tables, with grandparents telling old stories, children opening presents, couples exchanging passionate glances. Marissa had muted it 20 minutes ago. She couldn't listen to that. She couldn't watch that. Her phone had vibrated several times during the night. Messages from work colleagues sending those generic "Merry Christmas" texts. A message from her mother, who was in Portland with her father and younger brother, asking if she'd eaten anything. Marissa had responded with "Yes, Mom. Everything's fine. Enjoy the night with the family." A lie. She'd eaten a yogurt and drunk 2 glasses of red wine. But her mother didn't need to know that. There was also a message from her ex-boyfriend, James. He'd sent a simple "Merry Christmas, Marissa. Hope you're doing well." Marissa had read the message 3 times, then deleted it. James had gotten married 6 months ago. She'd seen the photos on Instagram, him and a blonde woman, smiling on a paradisiacal beach, with a diamond ring glinting on her finger. Marissa had liked the photo, because that's what you did. Because it was polite. Because nobody needed to know she'd cried that night. The truth was that Marissa had spent the last 10 years building a life that wasn't really hers. She'd built the life that people expected her to build. The life her parents expected. The life her coworkers expected. The life society expected from an intelligent, beautiful, and independent woman. But somewhere along the way, between the promotions and salary increases, between the projects she led and the meetings she coordinated, Marissa had lost something essential. She'd lost herself. On that Christmas Eve, while looking at the red stocking hung on the refrigerator, Marissa felt something break inside her. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It wasn't the kind of thing you see in movies, where someone screams or cries uncontrollably. It was something quieter, deeper. It was like a door that had been closed for a long time finally opened, letting out all the loneliness, all the frustration, all the feeling that her life had taken a wrong turn at some point and she hadn't even noticed. Marissa got up from the couch, that gray couch she'd bought from a modern furniture showroom and that was as uncomfortable as it was beautiful, and walked to the window. Her apartment was on a quiet street, but you could still hear some sounds from the city. A car passing. A couple laughing on the street. A child screaming with joy. All those sounds of people living their lives, celebrating, loving, existing in a way that Marissa had forgotten how to do. She placed her hand on the cold window and breathed deeply. Her reflection in the glass was that of a woman who seemed to be disappearing. Her eyes were red, not from recent crying, but from chronic exhaustion. Her skin had that paleness of someone who spends too much time indoors. Her shoulders were curved, as if carrying the weight of every decision she'd made, every choice she'd made thinking of others. And then, in that exact moment, while looking at her reflection in the dark window, Marissa Carter made a decision. It wasn't a rational decision, planned, thought through with pros and cons. It was a decision that came from her chest, from that deep place where we keep the dreams we think we no longer have the right to have. It was a decision that would change everything. Marissa stepped away from the window and walked to her bedroom. She opened the closet and started pulling out clothes, those executive clothes, those clothes she wore to look professional, competent, untouchable. She pulled out the high heels that hurt her feet. She pulled out the blazers that made her look like a hardened version of herself. She pulled out everything that wasn't really her. Then, Marissa sat on the bed, that king-sized bed she'd bought because that's what you did, not because she really needed it, and opened her laptop. Her hand trembled a little as she typed. She knew what she was about to do was crazy. She knew people would say she'd lost her mind. But on that Christmas Eve, alone in her apartment, Marissa finally understood that losing her mind was exactly what she needed to do to find her heart again. She typed an email to her boss. It wasn't a resignation email, not yet. It was an email requesting a 3-month leave of absence. No specific reason. Just 3 months for personal matters. She knew this would be seen as insane at a company like that, where people worked 70 hours a week and considered vacation a luxury. But Marissa didn't care anymore what people thought. Before hitting send, she paused. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. She could feel panic starting to take over, that panic that comes when you're about to do something that will change your life. But she could also feel something stronger than panic. She could feel hope. She could feel the possibility that things could be different. Marissa clicked send. The email disappeared from the screen. Done. Finished. There was no going back now. Well, technically there was. She could send another email tomorrow saying it was a mistake, that she'd had too much wine, that it wasn't meant to be taken seriously. But she knew she wouldn't. She knew she'd just taken the first step toward something she didn't completely understand, but that she felt she needed to do. Marissa lay down in bed, still wearing that gray pajama set, and looked at the white ceiling. Her apartment was silent now. The television had turned off on its own. The city outside had become even quieter. And in that solitude, on that Christmas Eve that had started like just another empty night in her life, Marissa Carter finally allowed herself to cry. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Tears of liberation. Tears of a woman who had finally admitted to herself that her life needed to change, and that she was the only one who could make it happen. As the tears rolled down her face, Marissa whispered to herself, "Now everything is going to be different. Now I'm going to discover who I really am." And that night, for the first time in many years, Marissa Carter slept in peace. The morning of December 25th arrived quietly in Seattle. Marissa woke up to the metallic rumble of a garbage truck passing down the street, the kind of sound that echoed through the winter-empty avenues of Capitol Hill. For a brief moment, still lying in bed with her mind foggy from sleep, she didn't remember what she had done the night before. Her thoughts floated in that soft space between dreaming and waking, where problems feel smaller and decisions feel reversible. Then everything came rushing back. The email. The request for a 3-month leave. The sudden sense of freedom tangled with absolute panic. Her heart kicked up its pace. She sat up, grabbed her phone with trembling hands, and saw 17 unread messages. 17. Her boss, Richard, had replied to her email at 5 in the morning. 5 a.m. That meant he'd woken up early, read her message, and answered immediately. His response was brief. Marissa, call me as soon as you're awake. We need to talk. There were also messages from her closest coworkers, concern, curiosity, speculation. News traveled fast in a company where people barely took sick days, much less 3-month leaves. In that environment, a leave request wasn't just unusual, it was an earthquake. Marissa inhaled deeply, knowing she couldn't avoid the call forever. She dialed. Richard answered on the first ring. Marissa? Are you okay? I got your email. I'm worried. Are you sick? Is something going on? She closed her eyes. How could she explain it? How could she tell her boss she'd woken up on Christmas Eve and realized her life was hollow? That she needed to breathe? That she needed to find herself outside of project deadlines and sprint reviews? I'm okay, Richard. Physically I'm fine. But I need time. I need space. I need to think about some things. There was a pause, heavy, confused, human. She imagined him sitting in his home office, surrounded by glowing monitors even on Christmas morning, trying to make sense of something that didn't fit into spreadsheets or performance dashboards. Marissa, you're one of my best analysts. You know that, right? You're essential for this project. I can't lose you now. Can we talk this through? Maybe you need a vacation, but 3 months is a long time. The familiar pressure began tightening in her chest. That pressure she'd felt for years, the weight of responsibilities, of expectations, of being the one people depended on. But this time, she didn't fold. Richard, I need this. I really do. And I will come back. I promise I will. But right now, I need to step away. Another long pause. Okay, Marissa. If you truly need this, I'll talk to the directors. But 3 months is the maximum I can approve. After that, you come back or, well, you know how things work here. I know. When she hung up, Marissa sat in silence for a long while. She had done it. She had actually done it. The first irreversible step. Now she had to figure out what to do with this sudden, terrifying freedom. She showered slowly, letting the hot water run over her face until she felt grounded again. Then she sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of steaming coffee. Something was different. Either the apartment had changed, or she had. The white walls didn't feel as empty. The minimalist space didn't feel as cold. It all felt possible. Like a blank canvas waiting for a first stroke. She opened her laptop and began writing a list. Not a task list, not a color-coded productivity spreadsheet, but a list of desires. Things she wanted to do. Things she had abandoned. Things she had forgotten mattered. Paint. She used to paint watercolor landscapes back in college. It had made her feel alive. Read. Not business articles or tech blogs, real books. Novels. Poetry. Stories. Travel. Not business trips to San Francisco or Boston. Real travel. Somewhere no one knew her. Cook. Her mother had been an incredible cook. Marissa had learned as a child, then gradually replaced homemade meals with takeout boxes and rushed lunches. She stared at the list and felt something bloom inside her. Hope. That afternoon, she couldn't stay inside any longer. She grabbed jeans, a soft white sweater, and stepped out into the crisp Seattle air. Capitol Hill was livelier than she expected for Christmas Day. Families strolled with kids bundled in colorful jackets. Couples walked hand in hand. Small cafes had their doors open, warm light spilling onto the sidewalks. A street musician played a soft melody on a violin, the notes floating through the cold air like snowflakes. Marissa walked without destination. She just let the city pull her. That's when she saw it, a tiny independent bookstore squeezed between a flower shop and a cafe. The kind of place that was disappearing slowly, replaced by sleek chain stores. She felt drawn to it, as if her feet knew something she didn't. She stepped inside. Warm air enveloped her immediately. The scent of aging paper and cedarwood filled the room. Behind the counter sat an older woman with silver hair pulled back into a low bun, reading a paperback. She looked up and smiled when Marissa entered. "Welcome. Take your time, dear. Christmas is quiet around here." Marissa returned the smile, a real one, not the polished corporate smile she'd practiced for years. She began wandering the aisles, trailing her fingertips along the spines of books. There were classics, modern novels, poetry collections, rare editions. She felt calmer than she had in months. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice someone entering the shop. Not until she heard a man's voice speaking to the owner. A deep voice. Warm. With an accent she couldn't place, not Pacific Northwest, not California, not Midwest. Something softer, rooted, southern but gentle. She turned, curious. And there he stood. Tall, maybe early 40s. Dark blonde hair with touches of gray at the temples. A well-trimmed beard. A wool coat the color of charcoal. And a presence she couldn't explain, grounded, steady, utterly unhurried. He held a copy of Steinbeck's East of Eden as he spoke to the owner about the edition. "This one's from 1994, he asked. "Yes," the woman said. "Last print before they redesigned the cover." "You collect?" she asked him. He shook his head lightly. "No. I just read. And when a book stays with me, I like owning a version that has a story behind it." Something inside Marissa shifted. Not attraction, not exactly. Something deeper. A resonance. As he paid and chatted, she watched him, the way he listened intently, the way he smiled, the way he seemed fully present in that moment. When he turned to leave, his eyes met hers. Just 1 second. One simple second. But it felt like something clicked into place. He offered a genuine smile, not polite, not practiced, and walked out into the cold. Marissa looked down and realized she was holding a book she didn't remember picking up. The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. Her heart was still racing. She bought it. Stepped out. Looked for him on the street. But he had disappeared into the crowd. That night, Marissa lay in bed reading the first pages of her new book. The words wrapped around her gently, intimately, like they knew her story. Invisible Women. quiet lives. Unspoken desires. Marissa felt something awaken inside her. A pulse. A spark. A beginning. She fell asleep with the book beside her. And dreamed of bookstores, unfamiliar accents, and the possibility that her life could be different. Real. Hers. The morning after Christmas arrived with a softness that felt almost unreal, not quite cinematographic, but close. The kind of morning where Seattle's gray sky somehow feels comforting instead of oppressive. It was December 26th, that strange day when the city wakes slower, almost hungover from the holiday rush. The streets still held remnants of the season, forgotten red ribbons, torn wrapping paper, colorful debris scattered like memories. Marissa walked through it all like someone crossing a field of ghosts. She had woken early, surprisingly rested. Around her, the apartment seemed less suffocating, less heavy. Maybe it was just the lightness of a decision made. Maybe it was the encounter at the bookstore, that stranger with the unfamiliar accent who had appeared and vanished like a character in a story she hadn't finished reading. And it was thinking about him that made her decide to return to that small bookstore. She didn't want to admit to herself that she was hoping to find him there. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was just the pull of something new, something that could break years and years of solid, almost petrified routine. She dressed slowly. Comfortable jeans, a light cream-colored sweater, and her hair down, and for the first time in a long while, she noticed she had actually groomed herself. Not for anyone specific, of course. At least, that's what she told herself. The walk to the bookstore was sunny and quiet. Marissa moved slowly, watching families emerge for ice cream, couples pushing strollers, people still carrying bags with late gifts. The city seemed happy, occupied with simple things, while she was trying to relearn what simplicity even meant. When she pushed open the glass door, the small bell chimed, echoing through the cozy shop like a greeting. Like the shop was saying, "You came back." The owner looked up from her book and smiled. "Good morning, dear. Looking for more books?" Marissa returned the smile and answered naturally. "Today. I'm just browsing." There was something comforting about this space. Something she hadn't realized she was missing until she stepped inside yesterday. A kind of quiet sanctuary. Marissa ran her fingers along the book spine slowly, breathing deeply, feeling the scent of aged paper warm her chest. Until she heard it again. That voice. That specific voice, deep and gentle at the same time. "This edition here, it's different from yesterday's." Marissa froze. It couldn't be. But it was. She turned slowly, and there he stood. The man from yesterday. The stranger with the indefinable accent, the carefully groomed beard, the eyes that seemed to see more than they said. He was holding another book, The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck, while speaking with the owner. The conversation seemed light, almost intimate, as if they'd known each other for years, though it was just his way. Marissa noticed that some people simply carried a naturalness that made everything more human. When he turned, his eyes found hers. And this time, the contact didn't last 1 second. It lasted longer. Much longer. Long enough for Marissa to feel her chest warm, and her heart stumble slightly out of rhythm. "Good morning," he said, with a subtle smile. "We met yesterday, didn't we?" Marissa breathed deeply before answering. "Yes, in the classics section." "So you like classics too?" She nodded, a little shy, a little surprised by her own reaction. "I do. I used to read a lot. Now I'm trying to get back into it." He smiled, and Marissa felt it was genuine, soft, almost welcoming. "Is there anything better than returning to something that was part of you?" The phrase touched Marissa in an unexpected way. Because it was exactly that, the feeling she'd had since waking on Christmas Eve. Like she was returning to a version of herself she'd left behind. The man extended his hand and introduced himself. "I'm Caleb. Caleb Dawson." Marissa shook his hand, feeling a firm, warm grip. "I'm Marissa." A comfortable silence settled between them. Not tense, not the awkwardness of strangers. It was something curious, light, as if both were trying to understand the strange energy that arose whenever they looked at each other. The bookstore owner noticed and smiled, like someone watching a scene worth remembering. Caleb glanced around and then back to Marissa. "Have you eaten?" "I was thinking of heading to the cafe down the street. They make incredible coffee and fresh pastries. If you'd like to join me." Marissa opened her mouth, surprised. She didn't do this kind of thing. Didn't accept invitations from strangers. Didn't go out with random people. Didn't do anything this spontaneous. But she wasn't the old Marissa anymore. And her heart knew it before her mind caught up. "I'd like that," she answered, almost without thinking. They walked out together, and the bookstore owner waved goodbye with a knowing smile. The cafe had that irresistible smell of fresh bread, melting butter, coffee brewed to order. Marissa realized she hadn't had a real pastry in years. Maybe more than a decade. They sat at a small table near the window. Caleb ordered 2 coffees and 2 fresh croissants without asking her preference, but he got it exactly right. "So, Marissa, you seem like someone living days of change." The observation caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, it's the way you look around. Like you're relearning how to be in the world. Like you're noticing things you didn't see before." Marissa went silent for a moment. He had hit the mark perfectly. That was exactly it. But how did he know? She'd known him for 5 minutes. "I requested a leave from work yesterday," she confessed, as if releasing something heavy from her chest. "I decided I need to breathe." Caleb smiled, but not with judgment. With understanding. "That's beautiful courage." Marissa raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Courage?" "Yes. Most people live unhappy for years and never do anything about it. You did." She looked out the window. For the first time, she felt that someone truly saw what she was trying to do, even though she herself didn't fully understand it yet. "And you, Caleb? What do you do?" His answer came with a different light in his eyes. "I write. Or at least I try." Marissa smiled. "A writer?" "Journalist, actually. But I'm working on something more personal now." "A book?" He hesitated, as if unsure whether to reveal. "Something like that. About choices. About paths that change everything." Marissa felt a slight chill run through her. The coincidence seemed too large. Or maybe it wasn't coincidence. Maybe it was exactly what she needed to hear. Caleb stirred his coffee thoughtfully, then looked at her with intensity. "What are you looking for in these 3 months?" Marissa took a breath. It was the first time she was putting into words what she felt. "I think I want to find myself. I want to remember who I was before work consumed me. I want to live simple things. I want to feel like my life belongs to me again." Caleb nodded with such natural understanding that it made her chest ache. "Then you're exactly where you need to be, Marissa." But there was something he wasn't saying. Something that hovered between them like an unspoken question. When they finished their coffee, Caleb stood slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Can I see you again?" Marissa felt her heart accelerate, but not with fear, with anticipation. Yes. He smiled, that smile that was becoming familiar. Then tomorrow, same time, here? Marissa agreed. And when they said goodbye, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Not naive or romantic hope, but real hope. The kind that's born when life changes direction and you realize, perhaps, that you've finally found a path worth walking. Marina returned to her apartment with a new book and a heart that had started beating again. She didn't know if it was because of the book, or because of Caleb, or because of the feeling that her life had begun to shift. But she knew something had moved inside her. Something that had been still for a long time had begun to stir. She lay in bed, opened the book, and began to read. The first pages wrapped around her completely. It was a story about an invisible woman, about a life no one noticed, about the importance of being seen. As she read, Marissa thought about herself. Thought about how many years she'd spent invisible, even surrounded by people. Thought about how she'd allowed her life to become so small. That night, Marissa fell asleep with the book beside her. And she dreamed of bookstores, of men with mysterious accents, and of the possibility that her life could be different. Real. Hers. The days that followed unfolded like a film Marissa didn't know she was watching. Each morning brought a lightness she couldn't quite name, something that lived in her chest, warm and persistent, like a small fire that refused to go out. She and Caleb found each other every day. Always starting at the bookstore. The small sanctuary in Capitol Hill had become almost sacred to both of them. Marissa would arrive first, browsing without purpose, letting her fingers trail across book spines, feeling the weight of stories waiting to be lived. Then the bell would chime. And Caleb would appear, as if he'd been waiting for her all along. They developed a rhythm. A silent, delicious habit, work side by side, each in their own world, but connected by breath, by presence, by the comfort of mutual understanding. One afternoon, while they sat in a small cafe overlooking Pike Place Market, Marissa finally asked, "Where are you from?" "Your accent." "I can't place it." Caleb smiled, as if he'd been waiting for the question. "Asheville. North Carolina. Mountains, rivers, the kind of place where time moves differently." He spoke about his childhood with a nostalgia so deep that Marissa could almost feel the humidity of the Appalachian air, could almost hear the river he described. "My grandfather had a cabin there," Caleb continued. "I spent summers learning to fish, to listen to birds, to be quiet enough to hear the forest breathe." Marissa listened with her entire being. There was something in the way Caleb spoke about his past that resonated with her own buried longings. "Why did you leave?" she asked gently. Caleb's expression shifted. A shadow passed across his face, the kind of shadow that comes from old wounds. "Because I thought I needed more. I thought I had to be someone important. I wanted to come to Seattle, become a journalist, tell stories that mattered." He paused, his coffee growing cold in his hands. "And I did. I became a respected journalist. I covered important stories. But somewhere along the way, I lost the boy who knew how to listen to mountains." Marissa felt a knot form in her throat. It was like listening to herself through his voice. Two people who had run their entire lives toward places that didn't make them happy. With each passing day, Marissa began to share too. She told him about her childhood in Portland, how her father was an engineer and her mother was a teacher. How she'd grown up in a house full of books and conversations about changing the world. How somewhere along the way, that girl who wanted to change the world had transformed into a woman just trying to survive each workday. "My father always said you should do what makes you happy," Marissa said one afternoon. "But he never did it himself. He worked a job he hated for 40 years because it was safe. And my mother, she stopped teaching because my father said we didn't need two incomes. She stayed home, raised kids, and never did what she loved again. Caleb listened with an attention that felt like a physical thing, like he was holding her words carefully, reverently. Then he said something that pierced through her. And you? Do you want to repeat what they did? Marissa felt tears begin to burn. It was the question she'd been avoiding her entire life. No, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't. Caleb took her hand. It wasn't a romantic gesture, it was human. Connection. Recognition. And Marissa felt it, in that touch, in the silence, in the pulse of both their hearts, like something inside her was finally waking up. A week after they met, Caleb invited Marissa to his place in the Fremont neighborhood. She thought it would be minimalist, ordered, elegant, something that matched the calm he projected. She was wrong. The apartment was beautiful chaos. Books everywhere, stacked in precarious towers, marked with sticky notes, with annotations scrawled in the margins. Photographs covered the walls without any logical order. Caleb as a child, Caleb with his brother, Caleb beside a river surrounded by mountains. A vintage typewriter sat by the window, surrounded by loose pages, pencils, and half-empty coffee cups. Welcome to my personal disaster, he said, laughing. Marissa walked slowly, as if each object was revealing a piece of him. She stopped in front of the typewriter. You write on this? Sometimes. When I need words to come slowly. When I need to hear them. She ran her fingers across the cold keys, as if touching something sacred. What are you writing now? She asked. Caleb took a moment before answering. A story about a man who left a life that wasn't his. Who quit a job that was consuming him, and went back to his roots. And how does it end? Marissa asked. He looked directly at her. I don't know yet. I'm living the story as I write it. Marissa understood, before he even finished speaking, that they were doing the same thing. Both were trying to write a new life. That night, they didn't sleep much. They talked until the Seattle rain began to fall outside, creating a soft percussion against the windows. Caleb told her about his father, a successful businessman who never understood why Caleb wanted to be a journalist. How his father had always said Caleb was wasting his potential, that he should have stayed in Asheville and worked the family business. 3 months ago, my father had a heart attack, Caleb said quietly. Not severe, but it made me think. Made me realize how much time I'd wasted trying to prove something to a man who would never acknowledge it. Marissa felt her heart squeeze. Is that why you want to go back to Asheville? She asked. Yes. I want to be with my family now. While I still can. I want to reconcile with what I am. Marissa felt a tremor in her chest. Because beneath his words, she heard something unspoken, and I want to reconcile with you. But there was also something else, a shadow of uncertainty about what came next. Later that night, as they lay in bed, not making love, just existing together in the darkness, Marissa finally asked. Caleb, when you go back to Asheville, what happens to us? The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. I don't know, Marissa, he said honestly. I really don't. She felt her heart constrict. Because she knew he was right. They had known each other for barely 2 weeks. They were two strangers who had found each other in a bookstore and discovered they spoke the same language of loneliness and awakening. But speaking the same language didn't guarantee a future. Are you scared? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. Me too, he said. But maybe that's a good sign. Maybe it means we're doing something that really matters. Marissa didn't sleep that night. She lay awake, listening to Caleb's breathing, feeling the weight of his presence beside her, knowing that this moment, this perfect, fragile moment, couldn't last forever. but while it did, she would hold it. She would hold it like the most precious thing she'd ever owned. When dawn broke over Seattle, Marissa woke to find Caleb already awake, sitting by the window with his typewriter. She watched him for a long time, seeing his fingers move across the keys, seeing his concentration, seeing the man who had somehow become essential to her in just 14 days. He turned and caught her watching. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Didn't want to miss this," she said. Caleb smiled, that smile that always undid her slightly. "Come here." She did. He pulled her close, and they sat together, watching the city wake up, watching the rain clouds drift across the sky, watching the world continue its rotation while theirs felt suspended in something timeless. "Marissa," he said softly. "Yes?" "Whatever happens, I want you to know that you changed something in me. You made me believe it was possible to wake up. To start over. To be honest about what I want." She turned to face him, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "You did the same for me." And in that moment, with the Seattle rain falling outside and the city breathing around them, Marissa understood something crucial. Sometimes people enter our lives not to stay forever, but to teach us how to live. And that was enough. That was everything. The days that followed were like living inside a perfect bubble, the kind that you know, deep down, will eventually pop. But while it exists, you live inside it completely, forgetting that the outside world even exists. Marissa and Caleb had fallen into a rhythm that felt both natural and impossible. They worked in comfortable silence. They read to each other. They took long walks through Seattle's neighborhoods, discovering hidden cafes and bookstores, building a map of their own city that belonged only to them. But underneath the surface of that peace, something was growing. Something that neither of them wanted to name. It came on a gray morning in early January. Marissa was at Caleb's apartment, painting. She had started painting again, something she hadn't done since college, when his phone rang. She was so absorbed in mixing colors that she almost didn't notice the shift in his energy. "Almost." Caleb answered. His voice changed immediately. Tense. Worried. "Yes. I understand. How bad is it?" Marissa set down her brush. "When?" Caleb asked, his hand running through his hair. "I'll be there as soon as I can." When he hung up, he stood by the window for a long moment, his shoulders tight like he was carrying an invisible weight. "What happened?" Marissa asked gently, already knowing the answer would change things. "My father. He had another episode. The doctors say I need to be with my family. That I should come back to Asheville." Marissa felt the ground shift beneath her. "When?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Soon. Maybe a week. Maybe less." The word soon echoed like a bell in the apartment. Marissa set down her paintbrush with trembling hands. That night, they sat on opposite ends of the couch, a distance that felt much greater than the few feet that actually separated them. "What happens to us?" Marissa asked, her voice barely steady. Caleb breathed deeply, as if gathering courage. "I don't know, Marissa. I really don't." "Is this the end?" "No. But, it's complicated." Marissa felt tears begin to burn behind her eyes. Because she knew he was right. It was complicated. They were complicated. A woman who had just awakened to her own life, and a man who needed to return to his roots. Two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, but maybe in exactly the wrong place. "Caleb, I don't want you to abandon your family because of me," she said, her voice firm despite the tears. "I don't want to be the reason you're not where you need to be." "And I don't want you to lose yourself in me," he responded. "You just started living, Marissa. You just started being yourself. I don't want you to disappear into me." The silence that followed was suffocating. "So what do we do?" Marissa asked. Caleb moved closer and took her hand. We live. We live this time that we have. And after we see what happens. The days that followed were bittersweet in a way that Marissa had never experienced before. Each moment with Caleb felt precious, fragile, like glass that could shatter at any moment. They walked through Seattle as if trying to memorize every street, every corner, every moment. They visited places they'd never been together. They ate at small restaurants. They sat on park benches and simply talked, about life, about fears, about dreams. One night, Caleb took Marissa to the roof of an abandoned building in the Fremont neighborhood. From there, they could see the entire city glittering beneath the night sky. Look at this, he said, pointing toward the horizon. This entire city is full of stories. Stories of people who found each other, who loved, who lost. And all those stories matter. All those stories are real. Marissa leaned her head against his shoulder. What's our story, Caleb? He took a long time to answer. I don't know yet. But I know it's important. I know that you're important. The night before Caleb left, Marissa didn't sleep. She lay beside him, listening to his breathing, trying to memorize every detail. Are you scared? She asked in the darkness. Yes, he answered honestly. I'm scared this is the end. I'm scared that when I leave, everything we built will disappear. And if it doesn't? Marissa asked. Then we'll have to be brave. We'll have to believe that what we feel is strong enough to survive the distance. Marissa moved closer to him, as if she could prevent him from leaving by holding him tighter. I'm going to miss you, she whispered. And I'm going to miss you, he replied. But Marissa, I want you to do something for me. What? I want you to keep painting. I want you to keep writing. I want you to keep being yourself. I don't want this separation to be an excuse for you to lose yourself again. Marissa felt tears fall. Do you promise me? I promise. The morning Caleb left, Marissa accompanied him to the airport. They didn't talk much during the drive. There were no words that could capture what they felt. At the terminal, Caleb held her for a long time. I'm going to call you when I arrive, he said. That's okay, Marissa responded, though it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. She watched him disappear into the crowd of travelers. And when he was finally gone, Marissa felt like a part of her was leaving with him. She returned to her apartment in silence. The place that had begun to feel like home, because Caleb had been there, now felt empty again. She sat on the couch and cried. Not tears of sadness only. Tears of confusion, of pain, of uncertainty about what would happen now. But as she cried, Marissa remembered something Caleb had told her, I want you to keep being yourself. And in that moment, in the middle of the loneliness and the pain, Marissa made a decision. She wouldn't let this separation destroy her. She wouldn't let it be an excuse to lose herself again. She was going to use this pain. She was going to transform it into something. She stood up, dried her tears, and walked to her desk. She had bought a typewriter days ago, inspired by Caleb's, and had been too nervous to use it. Now she placed a blank page in the machine. And she began to write. The first nights without Caleb were the longest Marissa had lived in years. Not the familiar loneliness, that cold, empty silence she had grown used to, but a new kind. A loneliness that hurt because she finally knew what she was missing. But she had made a promise. Not just to Caleb, to herself. And that promise kept her moving. Every night, Marissa sat at her desk with the vintage typewriter she had bought impulsively, inspired by Caleb's, and wrote. At first, it was just stream of consciousness, a raw attempt to drain the ache in her chest. But as the pages piled up, something surprising started to emerge. A story. A real one. Their story. The Christmas Eve when she woke up empty. The moment her life diverged. The bookstore. The stranger with the warm eyes. The month that rewired everything she believed about herself. The pain of goodbye. Her words were jagged at first, broken, uneven, almost gasping. But the more she wrote, the more the story found a rhythm. By the end of the first week, she had nearly 50 pages. By the end of the second, she had an idea. An audiovila. Not a polished podcast. Not a novel. Something raw. Intimate. Something honest enough to carry the weight of her heart. She recorded with nothing but a simple microphone and her own voice. She narrated as if whispering a confession into the dark. At first she hated the sound of her voice, it shook, cracked, wavered, but soon she realized that was exactly what made it powerful. Listeners didn't need perfection. They needed truth. 2 weeks after Caleb left, Marissa's phone lit up. Her mother. That alone made her stomach tighten. Their relationship had always been tender, but built on unspoken regrets, her mother's abandoned dreams humming beneath every conversation. "Hi, sweetheart," her mother said, her voice soft but strained. "Are you doing okay?" Marissa hesitated. "No, Mom. Not really. But I'm working on it." Her mother took a long breath. "Your boss called again. He wanted to know how you were doing. If you still plan on coming back." Marissa closed her eyes. She had been avoiding the thought on purpose. "I don't know, Mom." "You don't know?" Her mother's tone was full of that familiar worry, the kind that sounded a lot like disappointment. "Marissa, honey, you've worked so hard to get where you are." "Mom," Marissa interrupted softly. "Have you ever done something that made you miserable, for years?" Her mother said nothing. "Because I have," Marissa continued. "And I don't want that to be my life anymore." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, a small cracking sound. Her mother was crying. "Oh, sweetheart. I wish I'd had your courage." Those words pierced Marissa's heart. "You still can," Marissa whispered. Another silence. Then, "Maybe you're right." After the call, Marissa sat with her thoughts for a long while. Then she opened her laptop and composed an email to Richard. "Hi Richard. I've made a decision. I'm not coming back to the company. I'm grateful for everything I learned, but I need to take a different path. One that belongs to me." She stared at the sentence for a long time. Her finger hovered over the trackpad. Then she hit send. Her body flooded with adrenaline, fear, relief, grief, a storm she couldn't name. But beneath it all, something new. Control. For the first time in years, she felt like her life was hers again. 3 weeks after Caleb left, Marissa uploaded the first episode of her audiovila. She didn't expect anything to happen. She told herself she didn't care. But people listened. Quietly at first, a dozen listeners. Then 100. Then 1,000. Messages poured in. "Your story made me cry. This is my life too. I didn't know other women felt this way. Thank you for giving words to something I've been afraid to say out loud. This saved me." Marissa read each message as if they were tiny anchors pulling her back to the earth. She wasn't alone. Her pain wasn't unique. And somehow, that made it easier to carry. She recorded more episodes. Her voice steadied. Her story deepened. And her audience grew. She wasn't healed. But she was healing. Late one night, after she had finished editing her third episode, her phone buzzed. "Caleb." It wasn't a text, it was a voice message. She hesitated for a full minute before pressing play. "Marissa. I read your pages." She froze. "The ones you gave me before I left." I read every line. And I listened to your audiovila too. A soft breath. You're an artist, Marissa. You're a storyteller. You have something to say, something the world needs. Please, don't stop. Don't shrink. Don't disappear again. You showed me what it means to wake up. Now it's your turn to stay awake. Her heart thudded painfully. Caleb's voice continued, quieter. I'm in Asheville now, spending time with my dad. I'm working remotely and writing more than I have in years. And every word I write feels different. Because of you. Marissa pressed the phone to her chest, letting the tears fall freely. He hadn't forgotten her. He hadn't moved on. He hadn't closed the chapter. Neither had she. 2 weeks later, Marissa completed the first full version of her audiovila, a 45-minute story that poured her soul into each sentence. Her hands trembled as she hit publish. Again, she expected nothing. Again, she was wrong. The story exploded. People shared it. Commented. Quoted her lines. Sent messages that shook her to her core. One woman wrote, "Your story saved me. I was about to give up on my dreams." A man wrote, "I'm going to change my life. Thank you." A young listener wrote, "I think I'm waking up too." And with every message, Marissa realized she had done something extraordinary. She had turned her pain into a lantern for others. She wasn't just healing. She was helping others heal too. She closed her laptop, stood in the middle of her apartment, her new life, and whispered, "I'm not the same woman I was on Christmas Eve." She wasn't. And she never would be again. The 3 months of Marissa's lead passed in a way that defied logic, somehow both too fast and impossibly slow. Each day felt like a small rebirth, yet every night carried the echo of the life she had once lived. Her audiovila had grown far beyond anything she'd imagined. What began as a 45-minute experiment had turned into a series. A real one. With episodes. With listeners. With emotional messages arriving from everywhere. She had stumbled into a purpose that felt both terrifying and profoundly right. People weren't just listening, they were seeing themselves in her story. They wrote to her. "I felt invisible until I heard your voice. I left my job today. Wish me luck. Your pain became my courage." Marissa had never expected that her most vulnerable moments would become lanterns for others. But they were. Little by little, she realized something important. She wasn't the same woman who had cried alone on Christmas Eve. And she wasn't going back. Meanwhile, in Asheville, a world away from Seattle's gray skies, Caleb was changing too. His father had recovered well from the episode. Caleb spent long afternoons sitting with him on the porch, talking about the past, about failures and pride, about the years they had both let slip away in silence. One morning, his father said something Caleb had stopped hoping to hear. "Son, I'm proud of you. Not for a promotion. Not for an achievement. Not for the version of success the world celebrates. But for having the courage to come home." Caleb had grown up with the kind of expectations that feel like invisible chains. Returning to Asheville felt like unlocking something he'd locked away decades ago. He started writing again, not rushed, not for deadlines, but storytelling in its purest form. Local stories. Human stories. Stories that mattered. And every time he finished an article, he found himself thinking of Marissa. She was the reason he'd remembered the boy who once believed in possibility. Marissa and Caleb didn't talk every day. They didn't need to. A few voice notes here and there. Photos of their days, Caleb sending pictures of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Marissa sending photos of her canvases and scattered writing notes. Their connection didn't fade. It deepened. One night, Caleb sent a message that melted something inside her. I listen to your episodes as soon as you post them. Every time. I learn something new about you. And about myself. Marissa sat in silence after hearing it, tears pooling in her eyes. He wasn't just a chapter. He was a mirror. A reminder. A beginning. In the second month of her leave, Marissa traveled to Portland to visit her parents. She hadn't planned to tell them everything, especially not the risky, terrifying decision to leave her job permanently. But when her mother opened the door, she looked at Marissa with a gaze so searching, so tender, that the truth simply unraveled. They sat in the living room, the same living room where Marissa had once done homework, listened to her mother hum while cooking, dreamed of having a life that meant something. Her mother asked, "What's changed in you, sweetheart?" And Marissa told her. Everything. The Christmas breakdown. The sleepless night of the leave request. Caleb. The audio villa. Quitting her job. Discovering a version of herself she thought she had lost. When she finished, her mother's eyes were filled with tears. "Oh, Marissa. I wish I had done what you're doing now." A sentence that cracked something open between them. "Mom, you still can," Marissa whispered, taking her mother's hands. Her mother gave a small, fragile laugh. "You know, I've been thinking that too." What happened next surprised Marissa even more. Her mother began painting again. She found her old brushes. Dusted off her easel. Went to an art supply store and bought new tubes of acrylic paint, vibrant reds, ocean blues, forest greens. "I forgot how much this made me happy," her mother said one afternoon, eyes shining in a way Marissa hadn't seen in years. For the first time, Marissa felt like the cycle had broken. Her mother wasn't doomed to repeat a quiet, invisible life. And neither was she. When Marissa returned to Seattle, she realized something else. Her leave was about to end. The deadline loomed in her inbox, Richard's email asking for confirmation of her return date. The old version of her would have folded under the pressure. But not this Marissa. She sat down at her desk and wrote her official resignation. No panic. No guilt. Just clarity. She hit send. And felt free. Truly free. The more she leaned into her art, the more the world leaned back. Her audio villa wasn't just growing, it was taking off. A small digital publisher contacted her with an unexpected proposal. "Have you ever considered turning this into a book?" Marissa stared at the email in disbelief. A book. Her story. In print. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said yes. That evening, while she was reviewing her notes for the book project, her phone buzzed. "Caleb." She opened the message. "Marissa, I just finished your newest episode. The one where you talk about fear and rebirth. I am unbelievably proud of you. Everything you create has truth. Depth. Courage. Don't stop." Marissa pressed a hand to her chest, breath shaking slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, to no one. She typed back. "I'm learning to live. For real this time." His reply came seconds later. "I knew you would." That night, after a long shower, Marissa stood in front of her bathroom mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't the woman from Christmas Eve. Her eyes were brighter. Her posture was different. Her face was softer, freer. She looked like someone who had finally stepped into her own life. She whispered to her reflection. "I'm awake." And for the first time, she truly believed it. 3 months had passed since Caleb left Seattle, but for Marissa, time had developed a strange elasticity, stretching and shrinking in ways she couldn't fully explain. Her days were full. Her heart was fuller. Her life was expanding into rooms she never knew existed. But there was an ache growing silently in her chest. Not sharp. Not devastating. Just constant. Because no matter how much healing she embraced, no matter how much she created, no matter how brightly her new world was forming, there was a part of her that still wondered. What if Caleb never comes back? What if the story they lived together was only meant to ignite, not to continue? What if that perfect month in Seattle was just a beautiful accident? She tried to silence those thoughts, but they lived there, beneath her ribs, quiet, patient, waiting. And then, one late morning in early March, everything changed. Marissa was making coffee when her phone buzzed. She glanced out of habit, expecting a comment from a listener or an update from her publisher. But the name on the screen made her heart stop. Caleb. She stared at it for a full 5 seconds before daring to open the message. I'm coming back to Seattle. I need to talk to you. In person. Her breath caught in her throat. A dozen emotions surged at once: excitement, fear, disbelief, longing. She had imagined 1,000 possible scenarios for Caleb's return. None of them had looked this real. Her hands trembled as she typed. When? The reply came back instantly. Tomorrow. I land in the afternoon. Tomorrow. It didn't feel real. But it was. She spent the rest of the day in a whirlwind, not preparing her apartment or adjusting her appearance, but preparing her heart. What did he want to say? Was he coming back to end things properly? Was he coming back because he felt something? Or, was he coming back because he missed her? That last idea made her chest flutter in a way that terrified her. She went on a long walk through Capitol Hill, letting the cold spring air clear her mind. The city looked the same as before, the cafes, the bookstores, the rooftop where they once stood together, but she felt different walking through it. She wasn't the Marissa who had cried on Christmas Eve. She wasn't the Marissa who clung to people for meaning. She wasn't the Marissa who would break if the answer wasn't the one she hoped for. She was someone new. Someone rebuilt. Someone ready. By the time she got home, she felt a calm settle over her. Whatever Caleb came to say, she would listen with courage. The next afternoon, she paced the living room, wiping her palms against her jeans again and again. Then, 3 soft knocks. Her heart stuttered. She walked to the door. Opened it. And there he was. Caleb Dawson. But not the version she remembered. This Caleb looked transformed. His hair was slightly longer, touched with more gray. His beard was fuller, more defined. His eyes, oh, his eyes, held something heavy, something deep, something that made her breath catch. Yet he was still Caleb. Still the man who stood beside her in a small Seattle bookstore. Still the man who saw her when she didn't know how to see herself. Hi, he said, voice low and soft. Hi, she managed to whisper back. For a moment, they just stood there, studying each other with the intensity of people who had loved in silence, across distance and fear. Can I come in? He asked. Marissa nodded and stepped aside. They sat on opposite ends of her couch, the same way they had the night before he left Seattle. Caleb exhaled slowly. I should have been here sooner, he said. But I needed time to understand what I wanted, what I was ready for. Marissa's chest tightened. And now you know? She asked. He lifted his eyes to hers. Yes. I do. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers intertwined. When I went back to Asheville, I thought I was going to close a chapter. Fix things with my dad. Settle down. Do the responsible son thing. But the more I tried to build a life there, the more I realized something was missing. Marissa tried to breathe, but the room was suddenly too small. Caleb. He continued before she could speak. I missed Seattle. I missed writing. I missed feeling connected to myself. But most of all, he swallowed. I missed you. The world stopped. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. You changed me, Marissa, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Not just during that month we had together. But every single day since I left. Every time I listen to your audiovilla. Every time I read about your courage. Every time I watched you rebuild yourself from nothing. Tears began to form in his eyes. I realized something important while I was in Asheville. He paused, gathering himself. That protecting you by leaving wasn't love. That real love means standing beside someone. Building something together. Not running away because things are complicated. Marissa felt her own tears begin to fall. Caleb, I don't want you to abandon your family. I'm not, he interrupted gently. I talked to my dad. To my whole family. I told them I needed to be here. That I had found something worth fighting for. And you know what my father said? Marissa shook her head, unable to speak. He said, son, go get her. Don't make my mistakes. Caleb stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. I've been offered a job, he said. A position writing for a national magazine. They want me to travel, interview people, tell stories of transformation and awakening. He turned back to face her. And I said yes, but only on one condition. What condition? Marissa whispered. That I could base myself here. In Seattle. That I could have a home. A real home. He walked closer to her, his expression intense. Marissa, I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm not asking you to give up your life. I'm asking if you'd be willing to build something with me. Here. Together. Marissa stood on trembling legs. What are you saying? Caleb reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather journal, worn, beautiful, clearly old. This was my grandfather's, he said. He wrote in it every day for 50 years. Stories. Observations. Love letters to my grandmother. Reflections on life. He opened it carefully, showing her pages filled with handwriting. I've been reading it since I went back to Asheville. And I realized something. He spent his entire life documenting moments. Capturing beauty. Recording the people he loved. Caleb closed the journal and looked directly into her eyes. I want to do that with you, Marissa. Not as a journalist. Not as a writer. But as someone who loves you. He took her hands. I want to wake up next to you. I want to listen to your stories. I want to watch you paint. I want to support your audiovilla. I want to build a life that's ours, not perfect, not planned, but real. Marissa's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Are you asking me to? I'm asking you to take a chance on us, he said. Not because it's easy. Not because we have all the answers. But because what we have is worth the risk. He pulled out a small box from his other pocket. Marissa Carter, will you marry me? She didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Then, slowly, she began to cry, not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming joy, relief, recognition. Yes, she whispered. Yes? Yes, Caleb. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band with a single stone that caught the Seattle light and threw it back in 1,000 directions. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Like all the months of distance had been necessary, not to separate them, but to teach them both how to stand alone, so that when they came together, it would be from a place of choice, not desperation. The evening after Caleb's proposal arrived with a softness that felt almost sacred, the kind of night where Seattle's rain becomes a blessing instead of a burden. The city glittered beneath the clouds, and somewhere in that glittering darkness, two souls who had found each other against all odds were preparing to seal something that had begun in a bookstore and grown across months of distance. Marissa stood at her apartment window, watching the rain trace patterns down the glass, her left hand catching the light every few seconds. The ring felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like something she'd been waiting for without knowing she was waiting. Caleb was in the kitchen, attempting to prepare something he called a surprise dinner. Marissa could hear him humming, that soft Appalachian melody his grandfather had taught him, and the occasional sound of something clattering, followed by quiet laughter. She smiled despite the nervous energy coursing through her veins. An hour later, they sat at her small dining table, which Caleb had transformed with candles and fresh flowers. The food was, well, it was beautiful chaos. A traditional Asheville dish, chicken with herbs and roasted vegetables, that was somehow both slightly burned and perfectly seasoned. Homemade bread that was a little too dense but tasted like home. And a simple salad that Caleb had arranged with the care of someone who understood that presentation mattered. "I know it's not perfect," Caleb said, watching her take the first bite. "It's perfect," Marissa replied, and meant it completely. They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing, about his father's continued recovery, about her mother's painting, about the publisher's excitement for her book, about the future that was suddenly, terrifyingly real. "I have something I want to tell you," Caleb said, after they'd finished eating. Marissa set down her fork, her heart quickening slightly. "During these 3 months apart, I wrote something. A series of articles about awakening. About how people transform when they finally decide to live authentically." He paused, gathering courage. "And every single article was about you. About us." Marissa felt tears begin to form. "What did you do with them?" she asked softly. "I submitted them to a national publication. And they accepted all of them." Marissa's breath caught. "Caleb, that's incredible." "There's more," he continued. "They want to turn them into a book. A companion piece to your audiovila. 2 perspectives on the same awakening." Marissa stood up from the table, overwhelmed. "You're going to be published?" "We're going to be published," he corrected gently. "Together. Our story. In print. For people to read and find hope, Indiana." She moved around the table and sat on his lap, burying her face in his neck. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered. "Believe it," he said, holding her close. "This is real. We're real." After dinner, they moved to the couch, wrapped in blankets, watching the Seattle rain continue its gentle percussion against the windows. "I need to tell you something," Marissa said, her voice hesitant. "Something I've been afraid to say." Caleb turned to face her, his expression open, patient. "I'm listening." "When you left for Asheville, I thought that was the end. I thought our story was just a beautiful moment that would fade. And I made peace with that. I built a life. I found purpose. I became whole on my own." She paused, gathering her words carefully. "But the truth is, I missed you every single day. Not in a way that made me incomplete. But in a way that made me realize something was missing. Something essential." Caleb reached for her hand. "And now?" he asked. "Now I understand that wholeness doesn't mean being alone. It means being with someone and still being yourself. It means choosing to build something together without losing what you've built within yourself." Caleb pulled her close, and they sat in silence for a long while, just breathing together, just existing in the space they had created. Around midnight, Marissa's phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. It was her mother. At midnight. Marissa's heart jumped. She answered immediately. "Mom? Is everything okay?" Her mother's voice came through, trembling with emotion. Sweetheart, I'm sorry to call so late. But I had to tell you. I had to tell you right now. Tell me what? I'm leaving your father. Marissa felt the world tilt slightly. What? Mom, what happened? Nothing happened, baby. That's the point. Nothing has happened in 30 years. And I finally realized. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in nothing. Marissa could hear her mother crying, but not sad tears, tears of liberation. I'm moving to Portland. I'm going to open a small art studio. I'm going to paint. I'm going to live. Marissa felt her own tears begin to fall. Mom. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of me too, sweetheart. And it's because of you. Because you showed me it was possible. After they hung up, Marissa sat in stunned silence. Caleb waited patiently for her to process. My mother is leaving my father, she finally said. She's starting over. Is that bad? Caleb asked carefully. No, Marissa said, shaking her head. It's beautiful. It's terrifying and beautiful. She's finally choosing herself. Caleb pulled her close again. That's what you taught her. That's what you taught me. That it's never too late to choose yourself. As the night deepened, they lay in bed together, not sleeping, just holding each other in the darkness. Caleb? Marissa whispered. Yes? Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that we'll never stop choosing each other. That we'll never fall into the trap of just existing together. That we'll keep waking each other up. Caleb kissed her forehead. I promise. Every single day, I promise. They lay in silence, and Marissa felt something settle inside her, not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage. Not the absence of uncertainty, but the presence of trust. Outside, Seattle continued its gentle rain. Inside, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way were beginning to understand that the greatest love stories aren't the ones that happen by accident. They're the ones that happen by choice. Every single day. When dawn broke over Seattle, Marissa woke to find Caleb already awake, sitting by the window with his typewriter. She watched him for a long moment, seeing the man who had appeared in her life like lightning, who had taught her how to live again, who had chosen to come back. What are you writing? She asked softly. He turned and smiled. Our ending. Or rather, our beginning. Marissa moved to the window and sat beside him, reading over his shoulder. Two people met in a bookstore on a day that felt like any other day. But it wasn't any other day. It was the day that everything changed. Not because of fate. Not because of destiny. But because they both decided, in that moment, that their lives were worth fighting for. That love was worth the risk. That together, they could build something real. Marissa felt tears stream down her face. Is that us? She asked. That's us, Caleb confirmed. That's always been us. Christmas Eve arrived in Seattle with a gentleness that felt almost orchestrated, as if the universe itself was acknowledging the full circle that had been drawn. Exactly 1 year had passed since Marissa woke up alone, crying, wondering if her life would ever mean anything. Now, standing in her apartment, transformed into a space that was unmistakably theirs, she could barely recognize that woman. The walls were no longer white and empty. They held paintings, some by her, some by Caleb's mother, some by her own mother. The apartment breathed with color, with life, with the evidence of two people building something real. Caleb was in the kitchen, attempting to recreate the mole recipe his Asheville grandmother had taught him. Marissa could hear him humming that familiar melody, could smell the spices warming in the pan, could feel the presence of a man who had chosen to stay. But before dinner, there was something Marissa needed to do. She had recorded a special episode, the final episode of her audiovila series. The one that would tie everything together. The one that would tell the world what had happened when two broken people found each other in a bookstore and decided to rebuild their lives together. She sat at her desk, microphone in front of her, and pressed record. Her voice came out steady, warm, alive. A year ago, I was invisible. I was successful on paper, but invisible in every way that mattered. I had built a life that looked good from the outside, but felt empty from within. And then, on Christmas Eve, I woke up and realized I couldn't live that way anymore. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I had to find it. What I found was a bookstore. A stranger with kind eyes. A man named Caleb who saw me when I didn't know how to see myself. But here's what I've learned: the most important thing wasn't finding him. It was finding myself. Because if I hadn't been brave enough to take that leave, to sit with my own loneliness, to transform my pain into purpose, I wouldn't have been whole enough to love him. And he wouldn't have been brave enough to come back. This audiovila has been my journey. My awakening. My transformation. But it's also been yours. Because every message I received, every person who told me my story helped them wake up, you became part of this narrative too. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that it's possible to change. Thank you for showing me that my pain could become a lantern for others. And if you're listening to this and you're feeling lost, invisible, or trapped, I want you to know something. It's never too late. It's never too late to wake up. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to build a life that's actually yours. I'm Marissa Carter. And I'm awake. She pressed stop. The episode was complete. Later that evening, after they'd eaten dinner and cleaned up, Caleb handed Marissa a package wrapped in craft paper. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a book. A real book. With a spine. With a cover. With pages bound together. The title read, "Awakening, 2 Stories of Transformation." The subtitle, by Marissa Carter and Caleb Dawson. Marissa's hands trembled as she opened it. The first section was her audiovila, transcribed into beautiful prose. The second section was Caleb's articles, woven together into a narrative about a man learning to come home. And at the very end, there was an epilogue, written by both of them together. "We met in a bookstore. We fell in love across distance. We learned that real love isn't about never being apart, it's about choosing to come back. It's about building something that's strong enough to survive separation, doubt, and fear. This book is our story. But it's also an invitation. An invitation to everyone reading this to examine their own lives. To ask themselves, am I living authentically? Am I choosing myself? Am I brave enough to wake up? Because that's what this year taught us. That awakening isn't a destination. It's a practice. It's a daily choice to live with intention, with courage, with love. We're still learning. We're still growing. We're still waking each other up. And we hope this book helps you do the same. Marissa closed the book and looked at Caleb with tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We did," he confirmed, pulling her close. Later that night, as they sat on the rooftop of their building, the same rooftop where they had stood months ago, watching the city lights, Caleb took her hand. "I have something I want to ask you," he said. Marissa's heart quickened. They were already engaged. What else could there be? "Will you marry me?" "Not in a year. Not in 6 months. But soon. This spring. Here in Seattle. With our families. With the people who believe in us." Marissa laughed through her tears. "Yes, Caleb. Yes, yes, yes." He kissed her, and the Seattle rain began to fall, soft, gentle, blessing them like a benediction. The next morning, they video called both families. Caleb's father appeared on screen, his face healthier, lighter than it had been in years. "Son, I'm proud of you. And Marissa, welcome to the family." Marissa's mother appeared next, and behind her, Marissa could see paintings, vibrant, beautiful, full of life. "My daughter is getting married," her mother said, beaming. "And I'm going to paint the wedding dress design." Even Marissa's father, who had been quiet for so long, smiled and said, "I'm happy for you, sweetheart. Really happy." It was a small moment. But it was everything. That evening, as Marissa prepared for bed, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, the same mirror where she had stood a year ago, looking at a woman she didn't recognize. The woman looking back now was different. Her eyes were bright, alive, full of purpose. Her posture was straight, confident, grounded. Her face was softer, freer, radiant. She was the woman she had always wanted to be. Not because of Caleb, but because of herself. Because she had been brave enough to wake up. On New Year's Eve, Marissa and Caleb stood once again on that rooftop, watching the Seattle skyline prepare to celebrate the turning of another year. "Do you remember what you were doing last New Year's Eve?" Caleb asked. "I was alone," Marissa said. "Watching a movie. Pretending to be happy. And now? Now I'm here. With you. Building something real." Caleb pulled her close. "I want to spend every New Year's Eve with you. Every Christmas. Every ordinary Tuesday. Every moment that matters." "Even the hard ones?" Marissa asked. "Especially the hard ones. Because that's when we need each other most." As midnight approached, they counted down with the city. 10. 9. 8. And with each number, Marissa felt herself shedding another layer of the old life. 7. 6. 5. The woman who thought she had to be perfect. The woman who thought success meant sacrifice. The woman who thought love meant disappearing. 4. 3. 2. All of that was gone. 1. Happy New Year. Caleb kissed her as fireworks exploded across the Seattle sky. And Marissa understood, in that moment, that this was what awakening really meant. It wasn't a single moment. It was a series of moments. A series of choices. A series of small acts of courage that, when strung together, created a life worth living. If you're listening to this story and you're feeling lost, invisible, or trapped in a life that doesn't belong to you, I want you to know something. It's never too late. It's never too late to wake up. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to build a life that's actually yours. I'm Marissa Carter. A year ago, I was dying slowly in a life I didn't choose. Today, I'm alive. I'm awake. I'm building something real with someone I love. And you can too. All it takes is one brave decision. One impulsive choice. One moment where you decide that your life matters. The rest will follow. Trust me. I'm proof.